This one gets intense fast, and what's said here hits deeper than just a political argument. Before we break it down, subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what you think about this. On CNN Newsnight with Abby Phillip, Adam Mockler returned after his viral clash with Scott Jennings, this time facing off against Noah Rothman and Hal Lambert in a heated debate over the Iran war and what it actually means for Americans. The flashpoint comes when Mockler lays out a generational frustration. Young people have grown up through Iraq and Afghanistan being told these wars would make them safer, only to see long, costly conflicts with questionable outcomes. Rothman responds by accusing him of being ungrateful to U.S. service members, while Lambert jumps in to dismiss Mockler's argument as just feelings, creating a tense and contradictory exchange. Mockler immediately pushes back, drawing a clear distinction between criticizing political leadership and respecting the military, arguing that questioning wars that put troops in harm's way is not disrespect, but responsibility. And from there, the debate spirals into a broader clash over history, credibility, and whether this current conflict is repeating the same mistakes Americans have already lived through.
I just think it's just ungrateful.
I am so
to say
grateful.
That the service personnel are not keeping you safe when they are.
No, I feel less safe due to the actions of our leaders. I am incredibly grateful for our servicemen. And you're doing
your feelings don't make it a fact.
You are
your
doing
feelings the way you feel
together.
Here's a sign that we are in America's Iran war. The president who started it can't remember how long it's been going on.
We have a war right now, and we're to 6 weeks? They said, what's taking so long?
Not quite. We are in the 10th week of the war and the third month, with no end in sight, frankly. Donald Trump may not be keeping track, but Americans certainly are, via their gas prices. It's hit another high today, and one expert says that you can expect to see $5 at a pump if the Strait of Hormuz doesn't open soon. Now, the president is also dismissing how unpopular the war is.
They give me fake polls. They tell me about polls and this. It's interesting. They did a poll on the war with Iran, and they said only 32% of the people like it. Well, I don't like it, and I don't like war at all. They said 32% of the people are against President Trump. Well, when you explain it, is it okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon? It wouldn't be 32%. But even if you said that, there'd be a 32% because the polls are fake. I mean, they're totally fake.
For the reality, at the start of the war, Americans were pretty evenly divided in their support for the conflict. But now, 61% say that the campaign in Iran was a mistake. And there is a clear generational gap, too. While older Americans are split, 61% under the age of 35 oppose the war. And 80% of those under 30 say there were no sufficient reasons to attack Iran in the first place, while 51% over the age of 65 say that there were. So this generational divide, I think, when it comes to war, has always been a thing in America, but it seems particularly acute right now, Adam.
Yeah, for my entire life, the United States has been at war with some country in the Middle East, and young people have constantly been told that this will make us safer and make us better off. When we look around at the world today, we are less safe and we are worse off. Millennials grew up watching all these headlines saying that Iraq had been, defeated, that we had taken out Saddam Hussein and we had killed all the bad guys. Well, that turned into a grinding counterinsurgency that cost us $1 trillion, and it was a catastrophe. The same thing happened with Afghanistan. And now Gen Zers are going to the same thing with Iran. We are watching the same people who defended these first two failed wars go on television and defend another failed war. This war is failing. We have not gotten any political concessions. And I'm sorry, I'm not buying this trust the process line. I don't trust the same people who got us into the prior wars, amassed trillions of dollars in debts, and are not putting America first on the global stage.
So putting aside, perhaps for a moment, even the politics of this current moment, I mean, is it fair for young people to have that level of distrust of the people, to Adam's point, who maybe defended the last war and were wrong and are defending this war too?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think, honestly, Adam, that's immensely ungrateful to American service personnel and the people who keep us safe every day. After 9/11, it was by no means guaranteed that there would be no mass casualty terrorist attack on American soil in the immediate aftermath of that attack, especially since we had events in Madrid, in London, etc. And after the attack on Iraq and the elimination of Saddam Hussein's regime, we took a terrorist supporting enterprise off the map. We don't talk about Iraq anymore as a threat to national security because it isn't. And those who would pretend as though Iran is not a national security threat and are just frankly dismissive of the extent to which American service personnel get up every day to stop these people from executing the attacks on American and their allies that they plan every single day. This is a thorn in our side. It absorbs a lot of American taxpayer dollars, to say nothing of the energy of our service personnel. And I just think it's just ungrateful.
I am so
to say
grateful.
That the service personnel are not keeping you safe when they are.
No, I feel less safe due to the actions of our leaders. I am incredibly grateful for our servicemen. And you're doing
your feelings don't make it a fact.
You are
your feelings the way you feel.
You are doing. Let me finish. He was talking to me. He was talking to me.
Hold on a second, Hal. I'll let you respond.
No, we're talking
let him finish his thought.
You are doing the exact same thing that I just laid out in the opening. You are telling young people they shouldn't be asking questions. They shouldn't be questioning the people in power because it's ungrateful.
Questions about the nature of the
then what was ungrateful about what I said? I said that the leaders are making us less safe, and I can prove that. Right now, Iran has control over the Strait of Hormuz, and that is a weapon they didn't have control of 2 months ago.
Of course they did. They shut down the Strait of Hormuz in the 80s. And they opened it up in the 80s.
Oh, by the way, Iran with a nuclear weapon, you think gas prices are high right now? Iran with a nuclear weapon, we'd have unlimitedly high gas prices. They would take control of the Strait of Hormuz, and they would blackmail the world.
I don't think any country should have nuclear weapons, but it is the height of hypocrisy for the United States with the most nuclear weapons to tell other countries that they can't have a nuclear weapon. If Iran had a nuclear weapon, Donald Trump probably would have never gotten into this war.
How much farther away are they from having a nuclear weapon? Where's the enriched uranium right now?
They're non-existent.
Where's the enriched uranium?
We're going to get the enriched uranium.
No, where is it? I want you to answer.
It's buried right now. But
where is it buried?
You're asking me. I'm not in the classified briefings, and neither are you. So just
where is it buried? We know it's buried in Iran.
Let me finish.
Okay. Adam,
we are more safe than we were before we took out Iran's nuclear capabilities. Absolutely more safe. The Strait of Hormuz is going to be open, and Iran's not going to control it. That is absolutely going to happen. It doesn't matter if it's 2 weeks or 2 months.
It does actually matter because economists are saying if it's closed for a few more months, then we're going to go into a recession. So it does matter. It absolutely does matter.
No one's predicting that because the markets that are all-time high.
No one's predicting that?
The markets that are an all-time high, the markets aren't predicting it.
With the oil markets?
The inflation rate has stayed where it is. And by the way,
what was inflation
unemployment has stayed low. So when you're talking about everyone's predicting this.
Can you look the average American in the eye?
Just to be clear, inflation has ticked up.
Yes.
It has not stayed the same. But Bobby, you were around for the politics and the conflict of the last two Middle East wars. What do you make of this generational debate about whether it's wise to be going into another conflict in this region?
Well, I can't fault the logic that when you've seen this happen through your lifetime and you're still living with the consequences of it in one fashion or the other, you're bound to be reluctant to get into the war. Nobody is disputing for the fact that for a moment that the Iranian regime are bad guys. But when you hear the president and our leadership constantly changing the explanation they're giving for why we're at war, constantly changing the timetable of how long this is going to last, and then forgetting how long it has been going on, then you're right to push back and say, kindly give us a clearer explanation for why we're there, how long we're going to be there for. It's not enough to say, sit at this table and say, it'll be over, and then the Straits of Hormuz will be open. We've got no indication of that being the case. When the straits were closed, we were told this is a matter of days. Now it's been a matter of weeks, and we're no closer to it being open than we were 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago.
And on top of what you're saying there, I think one of the big problems with where we are in this conflict is that very clearly the administration has determined, because they've basically ended the kinetic conflict of it all, they've determined that the only way to actually get the things that we want, which is Iran abandoning its nuclear ambitions, moving away from funding terrorism, is to get to the negotiating table, which is the same truth that existed a year ago after they did the first set of strikes. So, I think that's part of the problem, is that war has not necessarily gotten us the outcome that they say that we are trying to get here.
No, and that's because the rationale for the war has shifted multiple times. No one here has ever said we want a nuclear-armed Iran. That is a red herring at this point. This is the only talking point that the pro-Trump folks have, because they've gotten themselves into a situation.
That's one talking point. Tara Setmayer is right. That's one talking point. The other is 47 years. They just say 47 years over and over again, and #1 state sponsor of terrorism.
That they were unprepared for. And what's incredibly ungrateful, you know who's incredibly ungrateful? Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, for the men and women who are serving in this war, who are on deployments that are extra long, who are not getting their ships resupplied, who don't understand what they're doing over there, who are being taken for granted. Our military is the greatest in the world, and the men and women who serve are the greatest in the world, and they are being taken for granted as props in a political effort by Donald Trump to make himself feel better till he can distract from everything else that's going on domestically. And now he's gotten himself into a situation where he can't even explain cogently why we're there, what's going on, and why the American people should have to pay the price for it. So that's what's going on here. When I was a Republican for many years, we absolutely looked at Iran as the threat that it is, and absolutely were trying to do things to make sure that they did not continue to be the world's sponsor of terror. But this isn't it. This is not it.
Noah, you talked about Adam, you accused Adam of being ungrateful. I just want you to look at these charts. Look at what happened to public opinion when it came to the war in Afghanistan. Was it a mistake for the U.S. to send military forces to Afghanistan? The war started out as incredibly popular and then it became much less popular. So about half of Americans said that it was a mistake, and about half said that it was not. The same is true of Iraq. Incredibly popular, right decision, 72% back at the beginning of it. And by the end of the conflict in 2014, it was down to 38%. Mm-hmm. I mean, are all of these Americans ungrateful? I mean, I imagine many of them they ended up tasting the consequences of the war, including the impacts on their lives, people that they knew, people who may not have even lost their lives in theater but came back forever scarred by it. I mean,
to clarify what I had said previously is that it is, in my view, ungrateful to American service personnel to say that they have not kept us safe when we do not measure.
That's not what I said. But he didn't say that. So you have to acknowledge
No. He's saying that we can measure non-events, which is to suggest that the attacks that have not happened, which none of us are aware of, were not avoidable. Because of the nature of these conflicts. And the conflicts themselves are what inspires the attacks. It's almost inviting the notion that America is responsible for the terrorist.
That's not really the argument that he's making. The argument that he's making is that the people who made the arguments to go into these conflicts in the first place misled, which is a fact. And secondly, that the conflicts ended up lasting a very long time, costing a lot of American treasure, and those are also facts. He didn't say it's because they're, they didn't keep us safe. That's not actually what he said.
Well, that is kind of what he said. But let's belabor the point. I have all the time in the world for criticisms of the president's rhetoric. All the time in the world. In fact, I think a lot of the reasons why the public is soured on this is because the president never approached Americans and solicited their support, told them the burdens they were expected to bear, and told them why they were going into this. But as important as it is to criticize the president's rhetoric, it's also important to talk about what's happening on the ground. And we are closer today to opening up the strait by virtue of what we heard from Admiral Brad Cooper today and the operation that was engaged of
the strait was open. Your dumbass head of MAGA blundered his way into this war, and now the strait is closed. It wouldn't have closed if Donald Trump weren't a frickin' moron who started this war.
Of course, it lasts 24 hours. Very important. We can't just glaze over that.
Let
the United States is transiting the Strait of Hormuz.
We can't talk about that response, and then I want Bobby to have the last word.
Well, I covered the war in Iraq. I was there for all the arguments going into that war in Iraq. I remember people saying this was the major sponsor of terror, and you pointed to 9/11. Iraq had nothing whatsoever to do with 9/11, and going into Iraq and toppling that regime, as much as I hated the regime as any right-thinking people, spawned from the direct consequence of that the Islamic State, also a terrorist group that came directly out of our actions in Iraq. So, if we want to look at historical precedents, we should not cherry-pick little bits out of a larger picture and pretend that the larger picture doesn't.
I also want to spill over the Syrian war.
To expand on my framework, I gave a very good faith criticism of this war and of the history of these types of wars. And I had one person say that I was ungrateful, and then another invoke the weapons of mass destruction that Iran could potentially be developing. What I was trying to say is that getting military successes, if you want to call them that, doesn't always translate to helpful outcomes for the American people. We've seen this. We killed Saddam Hussein. We took out the bad guy, and it hurt us.
It's arguable that this war is the most just war since World War II, because Iran has killed thousands of Americans. Saddam Hussein hadn't killed thousands of Americans. Afghanistan hadn't either.
But he ran on no new wars.
No, I'm saying
he ran on no new wars.
Yeah, but it was so justified. Why didn't he take it to the Congress?
It's a 47-year war.
Why didn't he take it to the Congress and the American people if it was so justified?
Ultimately, he may do that. But
ultimately, why didn't he do that before the bombs were dropping?
When
you say he had to. I'm using your own logic where you said it was so justified, the most just war since World War II. Then why didn't he go ahead and present it to the American people that way?
Iran has killed thousands of Americans.
We know we've established this.
Iran is a threat to the world. Okay, if they get nuclear weapons, they would control the Strait of Hormuz anytime they wanted to, and people wouldn't be able to do anything about it.
They do not
need high oil prices now, we're going to have skyrocketing.
They do not need nuclear weapons to control the Straits of Hormuz. The Straits of Hormuz are right there. You can't change geography. They need small speedboats. They just need to issue a threat. What happened in the last few weeks? They didn't do anything. All they had to say was, we're going to shut the straits, and the markets did the rest. The insurance companies refused to insure ships. Shipping companies refused to go. They do not need nuclear weapons to shut.
That is resolvable in the Horn of Africa and the Strait of Malacca. It's resolvable in Hormuz.
All right, Bobby, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate you.
This segment on CNN Newsnight with Abby Phillip cuts right to the heart of one of the oldest and most deliberately abused arguments in American politics, the idea that questioning a war is somehow equivalent to disrespecting the troops. What Noah Rothman and Hal Lambert are doing here isn't new. It's a rhetorical shield. It's designed to shut down debate by shifting the focus away from policy decisions and onto patriotism. Instead of defending the merits of the war itself, they reframe criticism as moral failure. You're ungrateful. You don't appreciate the military. You're undermining national security. But the problem is that argument collapses the moment you actually examine what Adam Mockler said. He didn't attack service members. He didn't diminish their sacrifice. He explicitly acknowledged them and then made a very specific, very legitimate point that the decisions made by political leaders can make the country less safe, even if the people carrying out those decisions are acting with courage and professionalism. That distinction is everything. And the fact that Rothman immediately blurs it tells you exactly what's going on. Because if you separate supporting the troops from supporting the war, then you're forced to actually defend the war on its own terms. You can't hide behind emotion anymore. You can't rely on reflexive patriotism. You have to answer the hard questions. What are the objectives? What has been achieved? What is the cost? And most importantly, is it working? That's exactly where this argument starts to fall apart for the pro-war side. Because Mockler isn't just speaking emotionally, he's speaking historically. He's pointing to a lived pattern that younger generations have watched unfold in real time. Iraq War, war in Afghanistan, conflicts that were sold with certainty, justified with urgency, and ultimately dragged on for years with enormous costs and deeply contested outcomes. And that generational perspective is something the panel only partially acknowledges, but it's actually central to what's happening here. For older commentators, these wars are chapters in a broader geopolitical narrative. For younger Americans, they are the defining background of their entire lives. They grew up with them. They were told repeatedly that these actions were necessary for safety and stability. And now they're being asked to accept the same arguments again, this time about Iran. So when Mockler says, I don't trust the same people who got us into the last wars, that's not cynicism. That's pattern recognition. And notice how the response to that isn't to rebuild trust. It's to demand deference. That's a losing strategy.
Because the data being discussed in the segment makes it clear, public opinion is already shifting, and it's shifting fast. When a majority of Americans, especially overwhelming numbers of younger Americans, start calling a war a mistake this early, that's not just disagreement, that's a credibility crisis. And you can see the desperation in how the pro-war argument evolves during this panel. At first, it's about gratitude. Then it shifts to national security threats. Then it escalates to worst-case scenarios, nuclear weapons, global blackmail, economic collapse. This is classic fear escalation. When the present reality isn't persuasive enough, you pivot to hypothetical catastrophe. But even that argument runs into problems. Because as one of the panelists correctly points out, Iran doesn't need nuclear weapons to disrupt global shipping. Geography already gives them leverage. The Strait of Hormuz exists where it exists. The threat alone can move markets. So the idea that this war specifically is preventing some uniquely catastrophic outcome becomes harder and harder to sustain. And that brings us back to the core issue, results versus rhetoric. The administration, under Donald Trump, has shifted its justification for this conflict multiple times. Is it about nuclear weapons, regional stability, deterrence, negotiation leverage? The answer seems to change depending on the moment. That inconsistency matters. Because if the goalposts keep moving, then success becomes impossible to measure. And if success can't be measured, then the public is left with the only thing they can measure, the cost. Higher gas prices, economic uncertainty, an open-ended timeline, and the very real risk to American lives. That's why the ungrateful argument doesn't just fail, it backfires. Because for a lot of Americans, especially younger ones, opposing these kinds of conflicts is how they express respect for the military. It's saying, we've seen what happens when leaders get this wrong, and we're not willing to blindly accept it again. That's not weakness, that's accountability. And the irony here is that the loudest voices claiming to support the troops are often the ones most willing to deploy them into unclear, shifting, and potentially unnecessary conflicts without fully explaining why. Meanwhile, the people asking questions, the ones demanding clarity, justification, and restraint, are labeled as emotional, naive, or ungrateful. That inversion is exactly what this segment exposes. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just a debate about Iran. It's a debate about whether the lessons of the last 20-plus years actually matter, whether repeated mistakes are acknowledged or ignored, whether skepticism is treated as disloyalty or as a necessary part of a functioning democracy. And based on this exchange, one side is clearly engaging with those questions more honestly than the other. That's why Mockler's argument resonates, not because it's loud, not because it's viral, but because it's grounded in something the other side keeps trying to avoid: reality.